Hey guys, subscribe for daily content. And if you're shopping for gear, make sure you check out the description for the newest items at some of the very best online retailers. There's also links for some of the items that I personally recommend. Thanks! What's going on YouTube? Metal Complex here, and today I've got a short little knife review / knife overview to share with you guys. This is the Kizer and Damn Designs Invictus. We've seen actually a bunch of different designs from Damn Designs come through Kizer and other companies. And while this is very similar to a lot of those, it is slightly different. And honestly, I think Kizer's version of these knives ends up being really, really good. It's a knife that's available, and spoiler alert, it's a knife that I really like. I'll link it right down below. You guys can check it out if you want. Thanks so much to Kizer for sending this in. Thanks to my patrons for supporting me. And please make sure to follow me on Instagram at metal_complex and or TikTok at _metal_complex. Let's go ahead and get some size comparisons. So any custom scales you find in this section can be found down in the description under Original Goat and others. Up against the AD10 and the AD20.5, kind of in between. I would say closer to the size of the AD20.5, but still large enough that it doesn't feel like a small knife. How about up against the Spyderco PM2 and the Spyderco Para 3? This knife is, again, kind of in between. And then finally up against the Benchmade Group Tillion, or in this case the Ritter Hogue and the Hogue Deca. How is the action? Kizer makes a pretty good button lock, and this is no exception. Honestly, the button lock or the plunge lock acting as the detent in this case works really well. There's a nice, satisfying, almost metallic click. It's really nice. And you also get, you know, that cool, shiny Kizer stonewash finish there. Honestly, it feels really, really good. I would call the flipping action, like, it's probably medium light, but there's enough there with the button lock that you can light switch it or push button it, and it's essentially the same thing. The button has very minor stick, which will probably go away, but everything feels really good, and you can push this thing down as hard as you want. Still get people saying like, oh, the plunge drag thing's not really that big of a deal. You're just making issues out of nothing, and all button locks are the same. No, they're not. Some of them don't have drag. This is a great example of one that does not have drag. Button drag, which is a term that I made up just to complain about apparently. But it does drive me nuts, especially those knives where you kind of have to find that exact amount of pressure to apply to the button so that it doesn't get stuck halfway down. This knife just doesn't have that problem. Push it down as hard as you want, that blade will drop. Push it down just a little bit and the blade will also drop. This is how they should be done. Thank you very much, Kizer. Let's go ahead and do carry profile. Thickness up against the Spyderco Para 3. It's actually very thin. Length and height up against the PM2 and Para 3 here. You can see here that it's fairly tall. With the flipper tab, it's about as tall as that hump on the Para 3, but it's not quite as long as the PM2. Honestly, my care experience with this was very normal, right? This is not it's not a huge knife. It's not a small knife, but it's pretty compact and it's pretty lightweight for the amount of blade that you get. Let's go ahead and do a hardware check. I'm going to get out my tools. As per usual, my tools are very inexpensive and very recommendable. You can find them right down in the section of my description that talks about the tools I use on this channel, or the pinned comment. Those were really buried in. I've got a little, it's like a tackle box that I keep all this stuff in off camera, and they were really buried in there today. T8 for the pivot, and then these are T6 screws. Kind of a bummer. Wish they were T8, but that's okay. Not that big of a deal. It's still very minimal. It's going to be a very easy knife to take apart. Two T6 screws for the pocket clip. One of them doubling as the integrity screw, or I guess the screw holding the frame together, right alongside with this one. And there is a filler tab that honestly looks, it's very nicely placed. Yeah, you can see it, but it's like so perfectly nested into the micarta. And apparently is micarta. Is that a micarta filler tab? Hold on, I was trying to like go really fast, but I always get hung up on stuff like this. I just expect those to be made of metal. But now I'm curious. It is definitely a T6. So let's see here what we got. Where is that threading into? Because the backspacer is also, must be a nested steel liner. Yes. So what are you? What are you made of? This, surely, I got it. It is, it's a micarta filler tab. That's so weird. Okay, but I think you guys will admit it does look better than two just like holes right there, right? But I mean, okay, that's interesting. Yeah, that worked. You're just gonna have to kind of do what I did there and use the tip of a bit or something softer if you want, and just sort of pry it out of there. But wow, that is really like nested perfectly in there. It's interesting. It's a slightly different color. Okay, anyways, sorry, got hung up on that. My curiosity got the best of me. Micarta and we do the hardware check. As long as you have the right tools for the job, you should be good to go. We have for materials, micarta, steel pocket clip, nested steel liners, very good, like that, and 154 cm for the blade, which is great. Love that steel. The weight on this guy coming in an unsurprising 3.88 ounces for, what did we say? What was that? Was it 3.25 inches of blade or 3.5 inches of blade? Let's look again. Did I even do the measurement? 8 inches overall with a I'm going to call that a 3.35 inch blade. 3.35 inches of cutting edge. Yeah, pretty darn good ratios, not bad at all. Balance there right behind the pivot. Okay, blade stock thickness, let's get that done and move on into the meat and potatoes. As I always say, blade stock thickness coming in at 122 thousandths. Definitely not a super thick knife. Okay, meat and potatoes time. You guys probably, are familiar with Dam Designs. A lot of his designs look very, very similar. I remember reviewing his knives a long time ago when he used, I can't remember who the OEM was. They were okay. They were interesting. They looked a little bit different. Once they got in with Kizer, right? I mean, I feel like this isn't the first time, but maybe I'm just wrong. Maybe my memory's not serving me correctly. I think this is probably the best version of this design, which again, there's like a lot of different designs that are all kind of the same. I like this one, I think, the best. I love the captive pivot, like the octagon pivot. That's really cool. I think all pivots should be captive. It's 2024. Like, why are we doing that still with some of these companies? But yeah, I think it's great. Ergonomically, these have always been good. The pocket clip's got a little bit of a bill, but it's not super offensive, right? And it's on the shorter side, well behind the 50% line, so that's nice. Blade is incredibly functional, incredibly purposeful. You have that beautiful, thin drop point blade with a full, it's a full flat ground blade. Just really great. This is going to be a slicer, and combined, that thin geometry combined with, that is really ready to slice. Combined with 154 cm, which is an awesome working steel. Very balanced. One of my favorite compositions ever. 154 cm is an ingot steel. It does have a powder form brother called CPM 154, but those are different. 154 cm, still great. Reasonable edge retention, nothing incredible. Great stainless qualities, reasonably tough, and very easy to touch up. All great qualities in a pocket knife that you actually plan to use. This is going to be very friendly for most people. Get yourself a strop and some compound. Most of the time, you will not have to actually take it to the stones to sharpen it. Just touch it up after a day of use or a week of use or whatever, and you're generally good to go. That's what I love about 154 cm. I also love that this particular blade is tumbled. Kizer does a fantastic tumbled finish with high reflectivity, and really over time you mark them up. It's kind of hard to notice because they've already got those little media tumble marks. I just really, really like that. Jimping's in a good spot. It's a really comfortable knife to use. I feel like if I was holding this and using it for half an hour at a time, which I definitely did not do while I was carrying this, just being clear. I use this for anytime I'm testing a knife for review, I'm just putting it in my pocket and carrying it around and using it for normal stuff for a few days. That's what goes into these reviews because I'm more of a design reviewer. And I feel like most people can kind of pick up a general idea of basic performance nowadays just by looking at it and finding out what it's made out of and who made it, right? It's such given information. It's better that I give my opinions about the design after just carrying it for a little bit, but that's okay. Everybody has their own thought process on that. But the blade did well. I mean, the light cutting that it did was great. It was so easy to use. It just kind of cut through things no problem, as is the case with a lot of knives that are mid-sim. There's nothing really ultra special or unique going on here with the blade profile or geometry. It did as well as anyone would expect it to do. But if I was going to take this out and use it for 30, 40, 50, an hour at a time, I feel like my hands would be less fatigued versus a lot of other designs out there. It's very comfortable. The blade's going to do most of the work, which is what you want, right? Yeah, it's got a very knife profile, right? It's a good tool. Kizer billboarding a little bit prominent, 154 cm. Again, the Damn Designs logo a little bit prominent, and then back here it says Invictus, which it definitely does not need to say, but it does. So, okay. So that rhymed. The button is in exactly the right spot. It's domed and slightly recessed, which is what you want. Not a lot of travel. Really good spot there. The backspacer is micarta. Kind of wanting some steel back here. A little bit of reflectivity. That would throw the balance off a little bit, so I can understand why they didn't do that. Pocket clip, super deep carry. That's a Damn Designs thing. If I remember correctly, all of his designs are like that. You can flip it over to the other side, as I demonstrated earlier, for a lefty carry. If you are left-handed, you got to be careful with button locks that you don't squeeze on top of them. But considering there's not a real choke-up spot, the natural position of the pad for your index finger is away from the button. So left-handed people, it's my opinion that you'll actually have a better experience with right-handed button locks because you're using your index finger to disengage the button, which as a right-handed person actually feels more organic. This actually feels better with my left hand, right? So left-handed people, you'll enjoy this probably more than right-handed people, just my opinion, and you can mount the pocket clip correctly. Right-handed people, there's no chance that you'll disengage the lock accidentally unless you are absolutely pounding on the back of the blade, which as you can see will survive a light triple tap, which is all that's required on this channel. But you won't disengage it unless you're doing something absolutely brain dead with your pocket knife. We've got plenty of examples of that on the internet. Or you're intentionally trying to disengage it with your finger, right? That's the only way it's going to disengage. If you're using it like a knife and not like a grappling hook or like a cannonball or like a hammer or anything of that nature, then it will perform just fine. The stop pin is located in its traditional spot. A little bit of shouldering there, that's great. No blade play up, down, left, or right. That's awesome considering it is a button lock, and usually those have a little bit of play. Runs on bearings is probably obvious. Little bit of stick on that button, but not a lot of travel, so that's okay. Honestly, a little bit of pivot lash, little tiny bit. I always check for that just to see how tight the tolerances are. Kizer's not usually a company that there's a problem there, but in this case, it's slight. Does that mean it's going to hinder performance in any way? No. The truth is, I'm a very nose-in-the-air, nitpicky reviewer, and I check for little teeny tiny, almost trivial things sometimes in this review, and I can't help but be honest about it when I feel it. So if you're like me and it bugs you, then it's going to bug you. If you're, the way that you should be is not bothered by it at all because it's not going to mess with you. More importantly, the detent, nice and clicky. No detent lash, that's good. And do we have a little bit of off-center, or is it just my eyes? I think that blade might be slightly off-center, which is probably just a pivot adjustment and body screw adjustment. But every now and then it happens. I like to see my knives centered, even the budget stuff. Speaking of that, what's the price? $75. Doesn't blow me away, but it's always nice to see 154 cm at 75 or less, when traditionally it's a steel that we see from 100 to 150. I think the micarta is nice. I think Kizer's build quality is very, very good. And it's a little bit surprising to see a knife that really feels a lot like a Vanguard series knives. It feels like Kizer's Vanguard series, but it's actually getting to that budget spot. So again, there's nothing ultra spectacular going on here, which is why I'm saying it's not blowing me away at $75, but I think $75 is a pretty good price. The knife is very functional. It makes for a great button lock. In fact, if you've never had a button lock, this would be a great first button lock. It's an excellent tool, very good looking design. Honestly, these designs have been good for a long time. If you like this knife, I would recommend it to the average person. $75, not bad. It's gonna go on my recommended knives playlist and my cheap knives I like playlist because it is in fact at 75 or less, which is the only criteria for that playlist. All right, that's going to be it. Please check this knife out, listed in the description. I think there's only one variation, but you can check down there to see. Please make sure to follow me on Instagram at metal_complex, and at least for the time being on TikTok at _metal_complex. Thanks again to Kizer for sending this in. Please make sure to follow me on Instagram at metal_complex. If you enjoyed this video, leave a like. If you'd like to check out my other content, I do, of course, have lots of videos of knives that are either expensive or inexpensive that I do or don't like, so check those out. And if you enjoy all my content, go ahead and click on that Metal Complex logo right there and subscribe, because there's definitely more coming. Thanks again for watching, everybody, and have a great day.